Welcome back. This is Around the Crown. We're talking all things Sacramento Kings and beyond. Join the Royal family by hitting that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, you might as well smash that like button. All right, Calvin, we are reminding everyone again about All-Star voting. It is All-Star voting season. You have until January 22nd to cast your All-Star votes. You can vote every single day, multiple times a day. Hopefully you guys are voting for Tyrese Haliburton, De'Aaron Fox, Harrison Barnes, Rashawn Holmes, whoever your favorite Kings players are. We would love to see some of them at All-Star Weekend. All right, Cal, so big news. We kind of covered it earlier this morning on the Royal Report, but Jason Thompson officially signs with a G League team.
Yeah, good for him.
He's played the most games in Sacramento Kings history. Still pretty young guy. I think he's only like 34 at this point, and he signs with the G League team. You know, we've seen multiple Kings players on their way back to the NBA this season, including DeMarcus Cousins, Kyle Guy, Nick Stauskas, Isaiah Thomas. So we have another one here that's coming back to the league, and, wishes go out to JT, and hopefully he can make it back to the official NBA.
Yeah.
All right, so I think it's time to talk about your favorite section, trades.
These guys want to talk about the Sam Amick report.
Oh, I got that one in here. Are we Sam Amick, the Cam Reddish one?
Yeah.
Okay, that's on my list here. We'll get there. First off, I think we can agree this Kings team needs defense, right?
Sure do.
One of the biggest things. They thought by bringing in guys like Mo Harkless, drafting guys like Davion Mitchell, bringing in or trading for Tristan Thompson, that was going to solve that issue. Obviously, it hasn't been fixed at this point. Not even close. So I want to go to All-Star voting for Defensive Player of the Year voting for last year. Number one in voting, Rudy Gobert takes home Defensive Player of the Year award. Number 2, Ben Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
Third is Draymond Green. Then you have Bam Adebayo. And number 5 is Giannis Antetokounmpo. All 5 of these teams were in the playoffs last year. They were all pretty good teams. Obviously, the Warriors could be a much better team like they are this year when they're a little bit healthier. But you look at this list, I don't take these votes too seriously, but I think you could argue that these 5 guys are some of the best 5 defensive players in the NBA currently.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's much argument about that.
There's a guy on this list that could be available.
Not could. He is available.
There's only one on this list that's available, and he was second in All-Star voting last year, and that's Ben Simmons. We keep talking about him. Calvin and I were much more adamant about a Ben Simmons trade earlier in the season. We both feel like he's sat a little bit too long, and we don't really know what to expect from him at this point. But there's reports coming out that the Sacramento Kings are still interested in Ben Simmons. And potentially,
there's a lot of teams that are interested.
They would be open to making a trade. So, however your feelings are on Ben Simmons, he's a great defensive player. The Kings need defense. I figured I would mention a couple other defensive-oriented players that I think the Kings could potentially go after as well because, if I'm GM, I think that they need to add as many of these guys as possible. Number 1 is Robert Covington. I've been a huge fan of Robert Covington ever since he was with the Sixers. We saw him end up in Houston. Now he's in Portland. Portland's not looking too good. They have a lot of injuries. He's a great 3-and-D guy. Kings need wing depth. I'd be happy to bring him onto this squad. Next up is Marcus Smart. Boston's been underperforming as well, and Marcus Smart's had some issues with Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Mm-hmm. I know this Kings roster has quite a few guards on it already, but Marcus Smart for Buddy Hield trade, maybe adding in some picks or something on the Kings side, I think would help this team a lot. Next up is Miles Turner, who you are a big fan of.
I am.
We talked about the Kings potentially trading for him, and he is available as well. And then the last guy is Matisse Thybulle, a guy that I've been a huge fan of. I don't know how available he would be. Probably not as achievable as these other three guys. But, that's 5 guys there that all play great defense. Most of them are available. The Kings need to make a move. Which one of these 5 do you feel the Kings should pull in first?
Well, that's the thing, is it's not one of, I'm seeing Covington ain't going to cut it. You're right. Not any one of these guys is going to cut it. Even Ben Simmons. You just add Ben Simmons onto this team, I think he does make them a better defensive team, but one person is not going to fix all the problems that this team has. They need more than that. So, and in my opinion, they need 3-and-D guys. Robert Covington definitely fits that category. At this point, I would welcome a trade for Ben Simmons. I really would, because I feel like the Kings they're broken at this point, not just from a record standpoint or a defensive standpoint. They're broken from a mental standpoint. Like, I really saw that out there tonight. They've had too many of these games where they just fall so far behind and they don't give enough effort defensively to get back into it. So you need a lot of roster turnover in order to fix this.
Yep.
I would love to have Miles. I would love to have any of those guys, So, but that's the thing, is it's got to start somewhere. The Kings need it. It has to start with one deal. Maybe it's even a 3-team deal. When you're talking about somebody like Ben Simmons, it might require a third team to get it done. And then after that, you work from there and you keep trying to add pieces. But they got to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think they need to add at least 2 or 3 of these guys in together to try and make something work without giving up Davion Mitchell, because you need more defensive guys on this team. And, bringing in defensive guys is good, but it's not going to fix anything right away. Defense is a team-wide issue and something that, you have to continue to practice and work on, and everyone has to get on the same page. But, if this Kings team decides, hey, we're going to go in a different direction, we're going to maybe do a mini rebuild, or we're going to try and get a good draft pick this season, or maybe trade some guys and get draft picks, I think you need to bring in 1 or 2 of these guys as well, so that when you come in next season, you're ready to go. You have a couple defensive-oriented guys. You have some young guys with high upside. And then you either have a De'Aaron Fox or a Tyrese Haliburton ready to run the point.
Yeah, it's just got to – there's enough sitting around, idly buying time, waiting to see on a night-to-night basis if the Kings are going to roll the same team out there, and we're going to see something that all of a sudden makes us think, oh, maybe they are, turning the corner. Like Monty McNair said, we can get back to that spark that this team had at the beginning of the year. Well, it feels like for the past 2 or 3 seasons, they've had that spark at the beginning of the season. De'Aaron Fox is making the next step. He's going to be an all-star. They just drafted Tyrese Haliburton. This guy's going to be a potential Rookie of the Year candidate. Now they draft Davion Mitchell. He's a defensive stopper. Maybe the Kings have what it takes to break the playoff drought. And then, here we are. We're now exactly halfway through the season, 41 games.
Mm-hmm.
And we always seem to get back into this same point of, well, better luck next year.
Yep.
But better luck next year doesn't always have to be the phrase that's used. You have an opportunity here to go out and do something, whether it's to improve the roster right now and make this team better and have a real chance at making the playoffs, or take the Oklahoma City route, stack draft picks, and look towards building through the draft. No fan base really wants to see that, but I think for most Kings fans, they would actually be okay with that at this point, because at least we're trying something different now.
So you mentioned Oklahoma City. I wanted to talk about them a little bit later, but I might as well bring it up right now. The Thunder and the Kings have basically the same record at this point. And Oklahoma City now owns 37 draft picks over the next 5 seasons, including 19 first-rounders, 18 second-rounders, and they have Detroit's 2022 first-round pick as well. So they could potentially have 2 top 5 draft picks in this draft to build off of Lou Dort and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Yep.
They're doing something right over there. They really are.
It'll only be something right if they those draft picks turn into guys that make them a winning team.
It's true.
You know, it still remains to be seen. The process doesn't always work.
Yes, but they chose a path, and they stuck with it. All right, well, everyone's been talking about, you know, De'Aaron Fox being traded for Ben Simmons, and if you're going to split up this Tyrese Haliburton, De'Aaron Fox tandem, who's going to stay, who's going to go? I saw a trade offer that apparently the Sixers might be open to bringing in Tyrese Haliburton instead of De'Aaron Fox. So this trade has Sixers receiving Tyrese Haliburton, Harrison Barnes, Marvin Bagley, and a 2023 first-round pick from the Kings. And the Kings receive Ben Simmons. How do you feel about this deal?
Ben Simmons and Georges Niang?
Oh, yes, and Georges Niang. How do you feel about this deal?
I have mixed feelings on it because from one standpoint, you're making a shakeup to the roster. You're getting a guy in Ben Simmons who can help the Kings in a lot of ways. But I really believe that it's a better pair for Sacramento with Tyrese and Ben Simmons than it is with De'Aaron Fox and Ben Simmons. Because both guys, Ben Simmons and Fox, they need the ball in their hands for two different reasons. Mm-hmm. One is to get his own shot. The other is to make plays for others. Fox is not a great catch-and-shoot guy.
Yeah.
Tyrese Haliburton is a very good catch-and-shoot guy.
And he can throw lobs.
And, I feel like they would be able to play off of each other better than De'Aaron Fox and Ben Simmons would.
Yeah, I agree. All right, moving on to what everyone wants to talk about. So Sam Amick reported that apparently Cam Reddish and Danilo Gallinari are the likeliest trade candidates for the Atlanta Hawks, and is rumored that they will be packaged together to, trade up or trade down. I saw a trade floated around of potentially Harrison Barnes for Cam Reddish and Gallinari. I like that deal a lot.
I'd be shocked if Atlanta did that.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to throw a pick or something in there as well. But I actually like that deal for Sacramento. It brings in another shooter in Gallinari, and it also gives you another young guy in Cam Reddish who can play some defense.
I think that deal is a home run if you're the Kings. I just don't see it as a realistic one.
So I want to read a quote here. Sorry, it's a little bit long. But it's an interesting quote from the GM of the Hawks. And all it does is it just makes me think, if I were to close my eyes and listen to somebody saying this, whether it's any GM in the league or not,
or coach,
whatever, but how do I feel if I'm Monty? I want you guys to kind of, think that way when you hear this quote. And this is right after the loss to Portland, right before the Hawks beat the Kings. So he says, we're seeing the same thing every game. Again, last night, we had the lead going into the fourth quarter, then we can't keep it. I sound like a broken record here, but it's the same thing every game. Again, ultimately, this all falls on me. So we've got to take a long look at this and see if this group is the group we saw last year in the second half of the season, or if it's the group we're seeing this year. And that's what we have to determine, and we have to make adjustments off those. Obviously, you can tell I'm a little frustrated. I think there's a belief that we're a good team. There's a belief that we can score, but right now there's no sense of urgency to make a stop. No sense of accountability. It's just not there. You guys watch the games. If somebody gets scored on, they go down to the other end. It doesn't bother them. It's a hard pill to swallow when your team is not playing as well as you think it should. Maybe I need to lower my expectations for this team. Ultimately, all this falls on my shoulders. I put this group together, and they're not responding. We need to take a deep look into this for sure. Maybe it wasn't such a great idea to bring everybody back. That's on me. We have a few weeks here at the trade deadline, and that's what I need to figure out. It's my responsibility to put a product on the floor that can and win. Right now, I'm questioning whether or not I have done that. I think this is a pretty telling quote, like I said, for basically any GM in the league, because I feel like a lot of these guys kind of bounce around. They all think, pretty much the same or close to it. We know Wes Wilcox is from Atlanta, So he knows the system there. But, you know, if I would have taken his name off of this and I put Monte McNair's name on here, it's basically the same thing, right?
100%.
So what does this tell you?
This tells me that the Kings need to make some deals. I mean, I think the Kings are it's a much more obvious situation than Atlanta, because Atlanta, you still have a budding superstar in Trae Young. You've got John Collins, and you just made the Eastern Conference Finals last year. So there is still some reason to think that maybe these guys are the right group of people to succeed. For Sacramento, you haven't done anything.
Yeah.
So it seems much more obvious to me that the time is now to change up this roster and not necessarily have to start from scratch, but you might have to come close to that.
Yeah, and I think this situation might be a little bit different for Monty because he didn't handcraft this team. You know, he's brought in a few players, but ultimately I think he needs to look at himself in the mirror and he needs to say, I failed. It's not a bad thing to fail. People fail all the time. It's what you do afterwards is what's important.
Definitely.
And he needs to look in the mirror and he needs to say, I failed. This team is not a playoff contending team. I need to make a move. I need to do something to put these guys in a better position. I fired the coach. That didn't help. What's next? Trading players. Because he's not going to fire himself.
Right.
And, you know, you heard the quote here. It falls on my shoulders. That's exactly how Monty probably feels. If not, that's how he should feel. And, I'm going to leave it at that. Speaking of Wes Wilcox, we saw him confront the shot clock operator after that other game. They fined him $50,000. Or actually, the Kings were fined
$50,000. Yeah, I think he was fined $15,000 on top of that.
You want to comment on that at all?
You know, it's one of those things. At the end of the day, I don't really think it really would have made much of a difference. They already came out and said that the shot clock operator was acting correctly. You know, there was no dispute that needed to be made. So it's just one of those things. I think you're seeing frustration build and spill over, not just on the players, but on the coaching staff as well. It's hard to blame them for that. And, you know, at the end of the day, these fines don't really do that much. I mean, you wouldn't like to have to spend that money, but the Kings can afford $50,000, and I'm sure Wes Wilcox can probably afford $15,000. So it's one of those things.
I really like this a lot.
It is what
actually.
it is.
I love the passion.
There's
from
a good
him.
way. Yeah, there are good things you can take from it. But at the end of the day, they don't change any of the problems. Going over to the shot clock operator and giving him an earful does not fix your team playing bad defense.
Yep, that's true. I just love to see the passion from guys in the front office because obviously they want this team to win. They care. And, you know, I'm not saying what he did is right, but I love to see that he cares that much. I see Patrick says at least Vlade would have made a move. He would have made a move. It might have been a bad move, but he would have made a move either way.
He would have made a move.
You know, that's one thing that I've kind of praised about this front office. You know, I think they need to make a move, but they haven't made any bad moves at this point. Yes, they need to make a move. They've sat back too long and not done things, but they haven't done anything to strap this team in the future. They haven't traded away any of these draft picks for bad players. But it's time. It is time to make a move for them. It really is. And, you know, Vlade, I really like Vlade, man. He's not a GM, and he tried his best. And, you know, we talk about Fox needs help. It's tough when you're a guy like De'Aaron Fox and your GM drafts point guards in back-to-back years because that doesn't really help you. But I also feel like Monty's hands were kind of tied after the whole Marvin Bagley situation. When you blow a draft pick on a guy like Marvin Bagley instead of getting a generational superstar in Luka Doncic, it puts a little pressure on you. And so you say, okay, we're drafting best available because we don't want to make that mistake again. And then you end up drafting multiple guys in the same position. And, you know, we saw DeMarcus Cousins get frustrated with Vlade Divac when Vlade drafted Georgios Papagiannis, I think it was pick number 12, Cousins is pissed. He says, I can't get any effing help.
Yeah.
And you're drafting guys that play the same position as me.
Yeah, I think if you're De'Aaron Fox, you definitely are going to feel slighted in that regard. And I'm not so sure I necessarily agree with you in that Monty McNair's hands were tied because Vlade took Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic. You know, when you're drafting in the top 3, there's a whole lot more pressure that come with those picks than when you're drafting 12 and 9.
That's true.
So, and I think the debate about best available player or best fit is much more amplified when you draft higher in the draft than when you are drafting lower. I still think Tyrese was the right pick at 12. You know, he's clearly a good enough player or he's played to a level already that shows he was probably better than the 12th pick. But I also think that there were a lot of good wings available both in last year's draft and in this year's draft that could have really helped this team.
They tried to trade for one in Sadiq Bey.
Yeah. And they didn't pick any of those guys. So it is kind of coming back to biting him in the ass, you know, a little bit here.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with Patrick here. You know, wish we had Draymond Green type of player. Yes, that's exactly what this Kings team needs, is they need a guy that's going to let people have it when they make a mistake. We've seen Mo Harkless try and be that guy. One reason I really like Marcus Smart is I feel like he's that type of guy. I feel like he would help this team if you're able to swap a Buddy Hield for him. Whether you have to give up a draft pick or something else, that's something I'm totally open to. Michael says, Tyrese is gutless, although I think he could be our best player.
I guess it depends on what you mean by gutless. To me, that sounds like he doesn't play with any pride or passion or anything like that, and I don't agree with that at all. I think he's not a physical player. You know, he's got a slender frame. And for me, the biggest thing with him is just his aggressiveness offensively. I think he needs to be better about not necessarily trying to take a game over, but he's so passive. He just is so passive. He constantly gets caught in the air with those jump passes, which, you know, half the time they're not going to work. Mm-hmm. We saw a couple turnovers tonight where he got in the air and threw the ball away. So he's definitely got things that he can work on, like everybody in the league does. But he's off to a very good start. Yeah, I think we can all agree on that.
That's true. And Brendan points out Denver announcers were saying how bad Hallie was defensively. You know, I feel like there's two sides of the coin on this. A lot of the Kings coaches, you know, praised his strides that he's made on the defensive end of the floor. And Calvin and I talked about in the last podcast, or maybe it was 2 podcasts ago, and how he is first in the league in bad pass steals and second in the league in block threes. And all that really tells me is that he's either gambling on plays defensively or he's jumping in these passing lanes. And, you know, there's multiple reasons he could be doing that. One of them is he's just trying to get the stats, which I don't feel like he's that kind of guy. And 2 is you don't trust the guys behind you. You feel that if someone, you know, gets behind you or past you, it's an easy bucket. It's a lot easier to play basketball, play defense when you got a rim protector behind you. The Kings don't have that guy, so Tyrese has to jump these passing lanes to try and get these easy shots and fast breaks and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your take on his defense?
I agree with you. He's not an on-ball stopper, even though I think that he has the ability to play some good on-ball defense. Where he really excels is being in the passing lanes and anticipating, you know, those bad passes like you talked about. And that is good defense, but the problem with that is the rest of your team has to be good defensively around you. If you're not going to stop the ball as a guard, then you've got to have other guys who can do that.
Yep.
And right now the Kings don't have anybody that does that. So I think there's a little bit of fairness in saying that he was playing bad defense. The whole team was playing bad defense.
Yep.
And that being said, I think that he is one of the better defenders on the team. Anticipation and being in the right spot at the right time, those are really good attributes for a defensive player.
Yeah, and, how frustrating has it got to be to stay in front of your guy and play good defense for 24 seconds, and then your team doesn't get the rebound and you got to do it all over again. And finally you get into these points where you're like, okay, we're down 10. We need to make a run. We need to do something. I need to get a steal here. I need to get the ball. I need to make something happen. I'm supposed to be the second best player on this team. The fans are chanting my name. They want me to do something. That's when you start jumping passing lanes and try and make a play like that. And, those are good things. You just, like Calvin said, you have to have the team around you to get your back so that if you don't win that gamble, it doesn't end up in an easy layup or something like that.
And you still have to be good rotating defensively so that when you gamble and you don't get it, you're able to recover, whether it's on the ball or, the communication between you and somebody else to say, I've got, this guy over here, you take that guy down there. And the Kings, when it comes to team communication on defense, they're as bad as it gets.
Michael says he's gutless because he should be the alpha, but he seems like he doesn't want to show up his teammates.
Well, all I can say to that is when you play on a team that is supposed to have an alpha already in De'Aaron Fox, whether or not we agree that De'Aaron is that guy, but when you're Tyrese Haliburton and you get drafted to this team and now De'Aaron Fox is your teammate, that should be the alpha. So you can say, well, yeah, he should take over as the alpha and take that position away from De'Aaron Fox. But in a locker room dynamic, it doesn't work like that. You don't just walk in one day and be like, hey, this is my team now. De'Aaron, you take a seat. So there's a lot of other things that come into that. And it takes more than just playing well. It takes more than being the rah-rah guy and rallying your team around you.
Yep.
He's in a tough position.
And, to be fair, when Fox was gone, he looked like an alpha to me. He really did.
Yeah, he did.
He really did. All right, King Edward says Fox and Buddy for Brown and Horford. Who says no? I'm going to say the Celtics say no.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think you have to throw a couple draft picks in that at least.
The Celtics are starting to be more and more in the news about how, a lot like the Kings, they have much higher expectations than the Kings do.
Yeah.
But they're not playing at the level that they expect to, and maybe it is time to break those two guys up. I also heard Jalen Rose have a take on NBA Countdown today, much like what we're talking about right now with Tyrese and Fox not having any help. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum don't have any help either. So his argument was keep those two guys together and get somebody else in there who can help them. Because this is a team they've been to the Eastern Conference Finals 3 times already since they've had those guys?
Twice
maybe?
Yeah.
Either way, those two guys are still very, very young. If I'm Boston, I don't know what's going on inside or behind closed doors. There's been reports that the two of them don't like each other very much, and they're creating some sort of rift in the team. If that's the case, that's difficult. But I would also argue with that. There's been tons of great teams that didn't like each other. The Bulls had their problems with Jordan and Pippen.
Yep.
Kobe and Shaq didn't get along all the time.
Yep.
But you know what? Those guys won rings. So it's a tough thing. And if I'm Boston, I don't know, man. It's going to take an incredibly large package for me to leave or to send one of those guys somewhere else.
Yeah, and I know these guys didn't win rings together, but two guys that really didn't get along at all at first were Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah.
And they ended up becoming best friends.
Yeah.
We saw John Wall and Bradley Beal. There was a lot of people talking about them and, who was the leader, who was the alpha, that maybe they didn't get along, stuff like that. They seemed to work it out. Obviously they didn't make it the finals or anything, but they had a lot of health issues, stuff like that. But, yeah, I think that Kings need to choose a direction. And honestly, I don't think De'Aaron Fox or Tyrese Haliburton is a shooting guard. I think one of them has to be the point. And this Kings team needs to bring in a solid 4, a solid 2, and a backup 3.
They need a lot. The Kings need a lot.
Yep. and some defense. Yeah, Michael says, I understand. So I guess we need to trade someone. LOL, Ty or Fox. Yeah, unfortunately, they got to choose a lane.
Well, and in a perfect world, you wouldn't want to trade either one of those guys. You'd try to grab, another star player or another two really, really good players to throw around them. But the problem is with all the other guys on the team, I don't know what type of package you're going to get back for these guys. Buddy Hield and Marvin Bagley. I mean, I just don't see a ton of eager people around the league saying, give me those guys right now.
I mean, they've probably been trying for 4 months to get Ben Simmons without Tyrese or Fox.
For years to trade Marvin Bagley. They've been trying for at least 1 year to trade Buddy Hield.
Yeah, I like Harrison Barnes for Lou Dort. He wasn't on my list, but I love Lou Dort. That guy's a great player. Young player, too.
Yeah.
And, you look at this team, it's not the youngest team. It's not the oldest team. But you do have some older guys like Harrison Barnes, Buddy Hield that are making a lot of money. I'd be happy to replace those guys with younger guys like Lou Dort or, that can come in and kind of grow together with Tyrese Haliburton. In a perfect world for me, this Kings team is bringing in a couple young guys and a couple draft picks, and they're trading out all the old guys. We're going to get a new coach at the end of the season. We're going to pick a path, and we're going to say, okay, the next 3 years or so, we're going to stick with these guys. We're going to build off of something, and we're going to go from there. We still haven't seen Monte McNair really put his stamp on this team. I think he's made, 3 trades? Is all he's made?
Not much.
He traded for DeLon Wright. He traded for Terrence Davis. And he traded for Tristan Thompson. And I think he did great in both drafts. But other than that, he wasn't able to bring in many big-name free agents. He re-signed De'Aaron Fox, which was important. And he re-signed Rashawn Holmes, which was important. And both of those, I think, were well-deserved deals. I think we got a great deal on Rashawn Holmes. But something needs a change. And it's got to be a defensive guy. All right. Anything else you guys want us to talk about before we move on to next? It looks like JN wants to talk about draft picks. Here, let me take a look at the Sacramento Kings draft picks over the past. I mean, we talked about it on the Royal Report this morning. The Kings, they've definitely made some mistakes in draft picks, yes. But at the same time...
But if we're being real about that, you could go back to every team in the league's draft picks for their entire existence. And there are many. You'd be shocked to see how many guys were drafted in the lottery that ended up falling out of the league. It's not just the Kings. That's drafting requires so much luck.
Yep. And the thing is a lot of these guys end up being good players just on other teams. Vinny, can you show my screen here? All right, we'll just look at a couple here. So, as you guys see on the right there, we got Oscar Robertson. Didn't mess that one up.
Yeah, that was a win.
All right, so Tyrese Haliburton, I thought was the right pick. Obviously, they don't have Davion Mitchell on here. Second round picks are, it's kind of a shot in the dark. Kenyon Martin Jr., Jamias Ramsey. You move on to 2019 draft. Kings did not have a first-round pick. 2018, Marvin Bagley, number 2 overall. I think that was a miss. I really liked Marvin Bagley a lot. Watching him in college, I never even thought the Kings would have a chance to take this guy. I think the Kings were slotted like the 6th or the 7th pick in this draft. They end up winning the draft lottery. They get the number 2 pick. I'm not a big fan of drafting these big guys that are super athletic, and that's how they dominate in college, and then it just never seems to exactly work out in the NBA. Gary Trent Jr., great draft pick, traded him to Portland. De'Aaron Fox in 2017, I think he was the right pick. Zach Collins also had another productive NBA career with Portland. Frank Mason, I was a big fan of Frank Mason. I don't know what happened to him. Marquise Chris, that was traded, I think, to Phoenix.
Yeah.
He's a Sacramento guy. He's still bouncing around the league. Willie Cauley Stein, I think most Kings fans wanted Willie Cauley Stein with that pick, but also another tough one, right? You already have DeMarcus Cousins, and you're bringing in a guy like Willie Cauley Stein. The Stauskas pick is the one that pissed me off the most because I was totally not on the Stauskas train at all. And I remember that year was really important because the Kings held a contest where you would win a spot in the draft room and you had a chance to help them choose a pick. And I was like,
help.
Yeah. So they're like, write up a thing and, what you think? And I'm like, I would really like to help them, but they're probably not going to listen to me anyway, so I'm not going to waste my time doing this. And then I see Vivek in the draft room, and he's like, Stauskas. And we get Stauskas, and he's underwhelmed. But, hey, he's still in the league. He's in the Miami Heat now. You got Ben Mclemore. He really fell in that draft. I think he was projected to go like number 2 in that draft. He fell to the Kings. I saw LeBron James tweeting about it afterwards, saying he was going to be the best player in the draft. Everybody had high hopes for Ben Mclemore. He's still in the league, and he's actually turned into a pretty good player. I saw him with Houston just a few years ago with the James Harden team, playing great. Ray McCallum, he fell off, second-round pick, like I said. Thomas Robinson was a big miss. But, I feel like everybody thought that he was the right guy at number 5.
Yeah, a lot of people were, there's a case to be made. Anytime you get picked in the lottery, in the top 13, 14 picks of the draft, there's a reason for that.
Yep.
Even Nick Stauskas. I don't know how much of Nick Stauskas you watched in college. I watched a lot of him because he played for Michigan.
I know you're a Michigan guy.
He was a great, great college player.
Yeah.
And had a lot of tools that you thought would translate to the NBA very, very well. It just didn't work out the way that a lot of people would have expected it to. And you can say that for a lot of people that get drafted.
Yeah, he was kind of another Jimmer for me. That's kind of where I was at on that one. And then, moving on, before that, Bismack Biyombo, he was traded, I think, to the Charlotte Bobcats. Right afterwards, Tyler Honeycutt, second-round pick. Isaiah Thomas was the real steal with the last pick in the draft in 2011. Played a lot of great years with the Kings, but the Kings refused to start him. They said, you're only a sixth man. You're too small. All you do is score. You're not a starter in the NBA. They let him go in a sign-and trade to Phoenix. He ends up going on to kill it with the Boston Celtics before injuring his hip. And then, DeMarcus Cousins in 2010, great draft pick.
Yeah,
you
think
see
we can all agree
Hassan
that one worked.
Whiteside is there as well. The year before that, Tyreek Evans, Rookie of the Year. Omri Caspi, a lot of good players here.
Brendan makes a good point here in the chat. He's saying, is Sacramento ruining these guys then? I don't know about ruining, but I do think a lot can be said for, especially if you're not one of the top, 5 to 10 talented players in a draft. If you go somewhere where the culture is horrible and there's a lot of losing, that can definitely have an effect on your play and your progression, your development as an NBA player.
Yep. Yeah, and Rico Hines is with the Kings now. He's one of the best developmental coaches in the entire NBA, so I think that helps. But on Calvin's point, you look at what happened to Marvin Bagley this year. We were like, oh, they hired Doug Christie. He's working on his defense. Marvin Bagley's going to have a big impact on this Kings team this year. And then he doesn't even start out the year. He's benched by Luke Walton, plays like 10 minutes in the first 5 or 6 games of the season. That is what hurts an NBA career. If it doesn't end it, it definitely puts a big damper on it. And, I think the Kings are ruining draft picks. Maybe not intentionally, but just the overall culture and losing constantly. You look at how hard it has been on De'Aaron Fox. It takes a long time to build a good culture, and the Kings are still working on it.
And it takes a village too.
Yep.
It's no small feat.
But I want to end this on a positive note. I like what they've done recently as far as not trading for Costa Koufos, not trading away draft picks stuff like that. You know, they've done a lot of positive things. So
yeah, I'm laughing because we got somebody in here saying they need a shaman to chase away the bad juju.
Oh, didn't we just see that guy go to
Kyrie
jail?
Irving can come in, since he can only play on the road, he can come to Sacramento and you know, burn his incense and stuff on the floor.
It's not incense.
Whatever it is.
That's funny. Somebody says Marvin Bagley is going to be an all-star in 10 years from now.
10 years from now? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about that, Sass. Star in 10 years? Maybe 5 years. 10 years is a little long. Yeah, Dennis, that shaman from January 6th, he's gone, bro. He's in prison for a while. For a while. All right, Cal. I won't make you suffer anymore with this trade talk. You ready to move on?
Yeah, we can move on.
All right, guys. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to take another look at Sacramento Kings basketball over the next week.